All right, everybody, welcome back to KC Happy Hour. This is episode number 58. I am your host, Xander Clements. Here tonight, we have Chris Wehrheim and Gary Carlton that'll be joining us in the later stages of this show to talk and continue talk that we had of a podcast a couple weeks ago, where we started kind of the conversation about what we could do for the X30 package to get some more belief of parity back there, because obviously, as we've talked on the show a bunch and the rumors around the paddock about the advantage that the Rawlson Performance Group guys have had because they have been super, super fast, and Ryan Norberg is on a banner year winning a ton of races. So we threw out some interesting ideas, and I think it was really cool, and a huge kudos to Chris and Gary when they'll join me a little bit later on in the show to talk about the dynamics of open engine racing, what that looks like for a guy like myself. I'm 24 years old. When I started into karting at that point, we had been long into pretty much every class being a spec class. So you buy the motor, you could maybe in certain instances, like with the Yamaha KT100s or some other engines, there was a little bit the builders could do to get to max tolerances, but there wasn't really any kind of open engine class racing that I'm a part was ever aware of. And that's a blanket statement for a whole spectrum of how much the rules are open. You could even have just a little bit of wiggle room as we talk with the X30 motor, while still keeping it a single manufacturer class. But this year and a little bit into last year, SKUSA started having the KZ package be a part of the full SKUSA Pro Tour and SKUSA Winter Series, which up until then had really only been on the SKUSA spectrum at the Super Nationals with the KZ2 format once a year, where we would just, everyone pretty much rented motors, a handful of people bought them. There was guys around clubs around the country and a handful of regional series that had open shifter classes that had the KZ format where you could buy it from different manufacturers, whether that's TM or Vortex, which is the parent company for Rock, from Miami, from whoever. But Gary Carlton, for those that don't know his background, I'm sure many do, but we do have a lot of new people that have joined the sport since his time as a professional driver. He was the American superstar shifter kart driver in the mid-2000s that became a factory, fully paid go-kart racing driver over in Europe for a number of years before coming back over to the States here to start his own team. And many of you are already very familiar with Chris Wehrheim from his time on the show, not just in the last episode where we talked about this, but also about his background in the sport as well. He's gone on to do car racing. He now is a driver coach for many, and of course the owner of the Offset Sport brand, which has been a proud partner at KC for quite some time. So I'm excited to get to that a little bit later in the show. We put out a post a little bit earlier today asking for some thoughts on what everybody had about the three races we talked about last week that were coming up over the weekend, at least three kind of beyond club level races that were going on. The Lone Star Grand Prix down at the SpeedSportz Racing Park in Houston was marketed and meant to be a little bit of a bigger race, had a massive prize payout, a huge thanks to Ferguson Trucking and a couple other smaller outside of karting partners that stepped up and added to the purse money for that event. There's the Rock Island Grand Prix, which has been a karting mainstay in the U.S. for a couple decades now. It's a historic street race over in Illinois. It went on over the weekend. And then, of course, the Route 66 Sprint Series had our Kart Chaser live stream over the weekend as well. And those guys were well underway in Chicago, just outside of Chicago in Joliet, Illinois, at the Autobahn Country Club. And all three of those races weren't, at least in the Route 66 series, wasn't a major drop off at the end of the season entry wise. The Rock Island guys, they've had, I wouldn't say a struggle in a crazy way, but they haven't had the entries that they had, say, 10 years ago in terms of the classes. So we put up a post. You can still go ahead and comment on it on our Facebook or Instagram or even on our YouTube page, where we were kind of asking for everybody's input, because we've talked about a number of different dynamics of what makes people come to the racetrack, what makes you guys want to come out and race, and what the differences are, why turnouts are where they are in each of the events, in each of the series. And there's a number of factors. Obviously, the first and easiest answer is cost. We have a lot of racing going on in the U.S. right now, and the market has kind of gone through cycles over and over. It's just the nature of the business. The market gets a little too saturated with races. Those races die off in entries, and the promoters either shut down completely or kind of dial things back, go to one or two less events. Then all of a sudden we stabilize. We get big entries again. We think we're even healthier, and then we kind of go over the limit. It's no different than a driver lap after lap trying to see how deep you can break. How many races can we put on that are going to pull 200, 300 people? And then we go a little bit too far and we start seeing entries drop, and then they go back. But there's other reasons that people come to the racetrack too. Again, the SpeedSportz race had a big payout. The Rock Island Grand Prix is a race that has a lot of prestige behind it over the years with all the many winners. And for a race that's been around to be on that level, it's been a crown jewel race for many, especially on the street racing world. And of course, the Route 66 Sprint Series, that's a standard regional series that has a points paying championship at the end of it. So I was curious to hear from you guys, from all different types of racers that we have that follow us, from club guys to regional guys to national, international people, and have you guys chime in. So we're going to have a lot of that Q&A kind of answer at the very end of the show. And then in terms of notable lines that we had come on, I wanted to go ahead and put the winners across the bottom of the screen. The Route 66 Sprint Series, you'll see in the cover shot for this, there was some junior drama. And I wanted to kind of cover this in a way that I felt comfortable with. And I thought long and hard about it. As we've talked about, we've prided ourselves in trying to be as real as we possibly can on the show. And full disclosure, right? We have an agreement with the Route 66 Sprint Series and with the parent company, the US ProKart Series, to do live streams with them. So it's in no one's best interest to just bash other series or other drivers or other shops just for the sake of bashing. But, I do want to make that clear at the beginning. I'm not trying to, stick up or stand against it, but it is an awkward spot for me personally where we're at, because I wasn't personally at the event. I don't know everything that went down. I have heard as many sides of the story as I can. Basically, in the long story short, there was a substitute driver used, and um, that ended up helping one driver end up winning a championship. But it was in a junior class, and it's a regional level series. And the reason why I wanted to even talk about it on the show is there was a similar bit of drama that went on, and I don't know how related it really was to anything beyond just typical on-track banter and rumors and stuff like that, where a post came up from a race over in England in the United Kingdom of this young man, who I believe is only 10 years old. The full post is a little bit too long for me to read for the podcast, but I wanted to bring this up just to kind of bookend the Route 66 talk and talk at least of what I want to talk about with that incident. If you want the full story, it involved in the KA junior class, so the drivers involved Ava Hansen, Cameron Brinkman, Austin Olds ended up second in the championship. Brinkman subbed in for Ava Hansen, won the championship, helped her clinch the championship by running for her and scoring points for her over the weekend. Obviously, as many of you guys know, we have the Off the Grid podcast here, Race Liberante, and the RF Factory. And the Race Factory RF Delta Sport team works with the MPG team. So if you want to hear the unfiltered side, that's on the Off the Grid podcast that comes later this week. But what I wanted to say about it, and I wanted from the KC Brandon to say, is this picture in the bottom right corner of this screenshot here is this kid crying on the grid because he was getting bullied by a number of the drivers around the paddock in the cadet class, saying anything from cheating to shouldn't be there to what have you. The whole post outlines it really, really well. The kid hadn't been DQ'd. The kid's been really good. He's been really punching above his weight class. And this is what the detriment of having conversations in the wrong light or that go the wrong direction when it comes to obviously kids' classes, when it comes to racing in general. And, we joke with Ryan Norberg about how good he's been, and the drivers will give him some flack about they think that he's got better equipment than they do and back and forth, but he understands where he's at and he knows. And I tell everyone that runs in the senior classes, the pro shifter, the X30 senior, and arguably even the KA senior class at the national level, you're on the top stage. You guys are headline categories, and you're basically need to look at yourself as a public figure in a way. You're going to have people that are going to be negative about you. They're just going to, that's going to come up. And it's a competitive sport, it's an individual sport. I'm not saying that stuff doesn't happen, because it does at the kids level, but it's something for me that I'm always trepidatious about when we have kids classes and when we have regional and club races. I want everything that comes from us to be positive. We can be as objective as we want to be about, an on-track incident, an X30 senior or pro shifter or any of the adult classes, because those guys are signing up even at 15 years old to go and run with the big dogs and run with the adults in the headline divisions that that's expected, that's accepted, right? It's no different than NASCAR and F1 and IndyCar drivers understanding there's going to be people that disagree with what you say, what you do on the racetrack, and there's going to be positive and negative stuff about you. But we're talking about kids that were involved in this situation here, and this is far from an outlier, right? There's all kinds of drama that goes on at the racetrack, but I want to, again, bring it back. That face is the face underneath the helmet of the last name that you're calling out that took out your kid. I remember I was taken aback one time at a national race. Kid I had coached, I knew the kid is Eric. His name's Eric Evans. And then I'm listening to tuners next to me on the stands. Come on, Evans, do this. Come on, Evans, do that. And we forget when we talk about all these situations, when you're not, really close with the kid driver, that it is a kid driver. You just think of him as a driver. But that can have some really, really detrimental consequences to kids that you don't want them to have to go through. So it's something that comes out at any point when we cover racing, when we cover all the drama that goes on, but it's not a focus of mine. It's not something I ever want to be a focus of mine, is kids classes for that regard. I'll hype up that we've got amazing kids turnouts when they have great battles, when they have cute interviews. That's great, but I'm not going to shove everything and talk about everything in the same way that I will a headline class for this reason, because the last thing we want is to have any more drama for them. They're fantastic drivers. Ava, Cameron, Austin, the entire K junior field. If you watch the racing, the battling was great, and they're doing an awesome job. And I want to give a lot of love to all those kids there, because they deserve, all the results they've gotten. And I'm sure they've got some great more results to come, but we're not talking professional drivers. And so with this kind of drama, again, that's all I want to say on it. I want to remind everyone that when we come out of these race weekends, that in those kids' classes, good, bad, or ugly, whether they crash, whether you think it's their fault, whether the kid makes a mental error in judgment and does something blatantly bad, it's still a kid at the end of the day. and we have to be mindful of what we say because we're shaping the next generation of racers, and they're at an age where they aren't signing up to be public figures in that regard. And that's just an after effect of some of the drama that can happen. So I wanted to remind everybody of that here on this show and talk and look that these are some great kids that we had racing. There's drama at the racetrack anywhere you look if you want for it. And I'll happily say my thoughts on stuff that's going on, series or drivers in the headline divisions, but it's not a focus point of mine, and it won't be a focus point of mine in this show because we had a couple questions about it. With that taken care of and taken out of the way, congratulations to the guys that were able to get the Rock Island Grand Prix rocks. Congrats to all the guys that were able to win Route 66 championships, and congrats to the big winners at the end of the Lone Star Grand Prix with the big money. Austin Garrison walked away with a big payday in K Senior. He won the Triple Crown there. Alex Stanfield Aiden Rudolph mixed those two up because they raced against each other a lot. Aiden Rudolph won in the 206 senior class. All of those guys put on some really good racing down there. Don't have it streamed, but it was a cool race. It was where I was at over the weekend while we had an awesome KC crew up in Chicago doing the Route 66 Sprints event. Now, again, all that drama gone, all that taken care of. Like I said, if you have any other questions, you can obviously reach out to me and I'll give you my thoughts on why I kind of do the stuff that I do and the way we do it. But I wanted to use that as an opportunity to talk about why and the potential fallout that can happen when you hype up the kids racing so much that we treat it like a kart life or the Discovery Baby drivers. And, even then I'm sure they get comments, the parents that, the kids might see on social media. And it's important that, we support the kid drivers. And when they want to get to the top level, when they want to race big classes, car racing or go-karts, that's when that pendulum can swing and it can be a little more objective. In any case, we'll take a commercial break. We come back after this. Gary Carlton and Chris Wehrheim will join me. We'll be talking a whole lot more intricacies and a little more technical parts of racing, especially on the motor side that admittedly, I am an absolute noob when it comes to. So I'm going to step aside as much as I can and listen to some of the greats that we've got.
Line has steadily made progress since its inception in October 2021. On top of servicing the Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana areas with products from CompKart chassis, Tillotson karts and engines, Miami, Briggs, Honda, and more, they're now promoting race events as well throughout the mid and coastal South region at NOLA Motorsports Park and Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi. Races are already set for the fall of 2022. September 3rd, October 22nd, and November 12th at NOLA Motorsports Park, and 2 dates, September 10th and October 15th at Finish Line Performance Karting. Driver line is set to finish this year strong. KC Happy Hour is presented by Precision Performance Karting. PPK is the exclusive South Florida distributor for the American-made Coyote Zenith kart racing chassis. PPK is offering trackside support at all the Cup Kart South Division events, the CKNA majors including the Spring Nats and the Grand Nats, the Sunshine State Karting Challenge, and a number of club events in the Southeast. New here for 2022 and in partnership with Brandon Jarscrack Racing, PPK is also offering full arrive and drive opportunities in the Junior Senior Briggs 206 classes at the popular Stars Championship Series and the GoPro Motorplex Karting Challenge events. The same professionally prepared kart and motor package has propelled Brandon to victories at Winter Nationals and the Monticello Divisional in 2022 are available to you. In addition to the Coyote line of racing chassis, Precision Performance Karting is also a distributor for Odenthal Racing products, Hilliard clutches, Vega tires, and Greyhound racing seats. Check out Precision Performance Karting on Facebook and Instagram or email them at ppkartingfl@gmail.com. From 4-stroke to 100cc to 125cc and beyond, TechnoKart USA has a winning option for you. Based out of Des Plaines, Illinois, TechnoKart USA offers both chassis designed to win in all divisions of North American karting and a top-level race support program at the U.S. ProKart Series, Route 66 Sprint Series, select Cup Karts North America races, and both the Rock Vegas and SKUSA Super Nationals. Podiums, wins, and championships are waiting for you whenever you're ready to get on a TechnoKart. For more information, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TechnoKartUSA.
All right, so guys, welcome back here. Let's go ahead and bring them on into the studio. Chris Wehrheim here and Gary Carlton. Gary, thank you for joining us. Chris, thank you for coming back as always. Appreciate having you guys here. Gary, I'm sure it's been a busy day at the shop as always, but again, at least the light's on where you're at. It's already starting to get dark near me and probably dark by Chris.
Yeah, I know we still have a big heat wave here in Northern California too. Normally here in Benicia, where our shop's located, I mean, it doesn't get more than like 80, 85 normally. And like today it was almost 110. So, I mean, I'm not like we're not used to it because back when we were living in Sac and based out of Marysville, it was really hot there. But I thought I kind of traded it in here in Benicia.
Oh, we lost him for a second there, but we'll see if we can get Gary back there for just a moment. There we go. We got you now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this might be a common issue. My phone always, I'm doing this on my phone, and I think since I've been on here, I've already had 2 phone calls. So
Busy man. Well,
yeah,
uh, let's kick it off, I guess. We'll direct this in a number of different ways, right? But as a team owner competing at the highest level in the SKUSA Pro Tour, you're obviously a chassis, manufacturer importer as well. So you see stuff top to bottom. But let's talk the SKUSA Pro Tour with the KZ class first. Everybody on KZ all year. What would you say has it been any bit different compared to the last couple seasons, you running a team from I don't know, parity, getting good motors, the cost to run guys to run at the level for SKUSA Pro Tour versus when people were on the 175 SSEs to, even the Honda days? Or has it been, overall similar, do you feel?
I mean, I'm always an advocate of having open engines in the sense of, either different manufacturers allowed, and I guess just the CIKFA format itself is probably the best way I've seen karting grow. I mean, I think we just had the KZ Worlds over in France this last weekend, and in just the amateur KZ2 class, just in one category, there was 126 drivers entered in the category. Okay, granted, that's their biggest race of the year and everything, but you can't say that system doesn't work when you have that many drivers in one category. And the KZ1 was, I think, at 40 something drivers, and the KZ Masters was at 69 drivers. So you just out of 3 categories, I mean, you almost have 200 drivers on the same engine platform. So and I think it goes to show too, in this year with the SKUSA Pro Tour, it was the biggest shifter field and the most competitive shifter fields we've seen since we've all gone back to KZ format. So, I mean, I think the proof's in the numbers that's what people want to do. I mean, it's nothing, no one's ever forced to their will to go to the racetrack, right? I mean, we all go because we want to, and we have a lot of competitors going and doing the shifter now. And I mean, I think the system works. And as much as people think that, you have to have the factory engines, you have to have this, you have to have that. I mean, if we look at X30 right now, I think it's really safe to say everyone is under the impression that you have to have Rawlson power, right? And that's at a spec engine, where in KZ, I mean, I saw in Newcastle, I mean, Hannah was up front, Vortex. We had 3 different TM engine builders up in the front. Kramer's on factory TM, AJ on SRP TM, Hunter and Mikhail on both SweetTech TMs. Those are 3 different engine builders that are in the top 5. I think Billy was running in the top 5. IAME, 3 different engine manufacturers. What do you have? 5 different engine builders, all in the top 5 at given points of the weekend. And when you see something like X30, where you just have the Rawlson guys driving off in the distance, I mean, yes, it's more open. Yes, you can say it's a little bit more money, but in the end, I mean, I see more parity and close racing in the shifter at the moment than our headline tag class now, at least in the SKUSA.
And Chris, when you and I kind of got onto this front, we were talking X30, even in comparison to KA, because when you go to these big races, at the end of the day, whether it's an open class or it's a spec class, and however long the motor is advertised to run on, a set piston in between rebuilds, if you're spending the money to travel and you're spending the money on tires to be there for 4 days, you're showing up with fresh equipment. And that was part of the argument you brought up, even for K at X30. Guys are still showing up with 2 brand new, at least fully fresh rebuilt pieces, and the rebuild costs are similar. So when we talk this open racing, again, for everyone, this is on the national level and then international level, but we're still showing up and spending the money either way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been confused on the rule of why we can only, check in one engine on the weekend when no one is showing up with one engine on the weekend. They like to say it's because the consumer and trying to make, the guys feel like they can show up. But you do one race like that and you see what the level's like and you're like, I'm not coming back to this, so you kind of set an unrealistic expectation. But Gary is 100% right. I mean, if you look at the KZ category this year and the KZ category in Europe, and look more to KZ2, not KZ1, I mean, everyone said the IAME engine in KZ for years wasn't good. And then all of a sudden it's in KZ2, it's running up front with multiple different engine builders. I just think that, you know, we'll see more parity when you open it up a little bit more. And like Gary said, I don't think anyone's questioning if anyone's cheating in KZ or someone has this or that more than the other. You know, it's not completely open, but you kind of are like, yeah, I mean, let the best man do their job and their work and let it shine. And I always think I can understand spec categories for certain more regional level racing, but at the top level, we should be more inclusive with all the manufacturers in the industry. And that's only going to help the sport grow more. One question I actually have for Gary, because you talked about this in the beginning, is I wouldn't have the answer for this, but Gary does both the KZ and the rock shifter category. And I've always wondered if there's a big difference in the cost to run a spec engine category over the course of a weekend and year versus racing KZ at SKUSA Pro Tour over the course of the year and weekend.
There's not much big difference honestly. I mean, they're both more or less the same engine. Obviously, the KZs do rev a little bit higher than the rocks. So yes, it all depends on too how you're running the engines. The KZs now with the Aspen fuel, it can be a little bit more delicate. If you lean them down too much, they can detonate quite easily. But that's when you're pushing it to the absolute limit. I mean, we've actually seen now with the Aspen fuel, even the 100cc stuff, if you run them too lean, that they can have failures and everything. It's a little bit more delicate fuel, and just how it is, right? I mean, that's the risk you take by going that lean, and half the time it's not even better when it is that lean. So it's the relative cost is not that much more. And like Chris said, I mean, it's the same in the tags. You're going to show up with fresh engines anyways at a race like that. And I mean, my biggest thing is I never really understood. So we all know how these engines are manufactured out of cast pieces. Well, if anyone knows so much about casting pieces, they're never the same, ever. It doesn't matter how the manufacturing process and casts wear out. There's different casts, molds. I mean, it's not just one mold for all these engines. So there is impurities in engines. So when you have a spec class where you cannot touch the engine, you're going to have impurities, period. I mean, there's no doubt that you get from one X30 or one Rock or any spec series, any spec manufacturer are going to have one engine that's a little bit better than the other. At least with these categories that have open porting and things like that, being it the OK categories, the KZ categories, where you can actually modify the ports, an engine builder himself can put the engine to a spec that he wants, because he's allowed to, and make all the engines just run the same. I mean, we do everything that I've seen working at Modena, working at IAME, working at SweetTech. We can make them all the same. Right. You just take one engine. Okay, we want the port timing there. You put the port timing there. Period. Right. That's where the engine runs. So when people say, spec racing to me, for them it's less expensive. It's like, well, no, it's not, because then you get these big teams that just go buy 30, 40 engines at a time, run through them all, and go, okay, those are the 10 best ones. Those are going to be for our best 10 drivers, and the rest of them will sell off. Yeah. So where's the cost difference? And my whole thing was, in this industry, what if, and me being a go-kart manufacturer, what if a person said to me, like, Gary, you can't change your go-kart. You can't put different rims. You have to, like, how your cart comes out of the box, you can't change it. People are like, well, that's crazy. You can't do that. Well, then why are we doing that to the engines? Yeah. Why are we cutting half of the industry and basically telling all these engine builders that, like, no, you know what you do the best or what you can make money on? No, we don't want to do that. But people like myself, people like OTK, we can come out, we got this new rim that's $600, which you need 3 sets of those every week. And no one really says anything about it. But, God forbid an engine builder comes out with a new head that's maybe $150. I developed a new head insert that gives you a little bit more horsepower, and, you can buy it. Oh, no, we can't. No one can do that. No, that's a bad thing. It's like, and for me, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, in the KZ stuff, even in Europe, would you guys, I mean, I know you just talked about being able to change the port time. You have your specs, you can make it to you want, but were you guys ever going through massive amounts of parts? Or did you ever hear of like independent teams going through massive amounts of parts to find pieces to fit together? Like we do hear stories now, more so with the IAME and other categories as well. But I think IAME is the biggest, so we can talk about that. Where even with road tax back in the day, where you hear people buying. I remember stories of Sargent buying, when you worked with them, buying 30 engines, 30 pipes, 50 carburetors. And it's still done today. I mean, I hear people all the time, we're buying 20 engines and going through them to build 2 or 3. Did you ever experience that with the KZ stuff?
Never.
Yeah.
I mean, the only time we would change parts is if we destroyed it or we ported it too much and we got it past a point where you couldn't fix it or something like that. But I mean, no, I mean, you just took one, like I said, you send an engine to SRP, Rainey, all these other people out of the box, they do their tune up to it and it's up to their standard. It's to their standard, and that's what the engine is. And it runs. I mean, as much people I know, they're going to watch this and like, oh yeah, you're right, Gary, you got one engine that's good, one engine's bad. I mean, all the stuff that we get from SweetTech, I can overlay the data on all of them and they all look exactly the same. Where I see it all the time, I mean, I can visibly see it on the track when I watch X30K, like, okay, that guy has something that no one else has. I mean, we see it all the time, right? And it's not, and I'm not pinpointing out other people. I mean, you see it all the time because you hear about things like, yeah, I got this one engine that's just amazingly fast. And we're all like, and that's all of our spec stuff. We have like this one cylinder or this or that, like everyone, I mean, literally would die for like, sleep, if they sleep with it in their bed, at night because they don't want to lose it. And it's funny, like I get to my KZ engines and all this stuff that I have in my shop, and I just think like, if we ruin that cylinder, whatever, I'll just go buy a new one, give one to Rainey. They'll put it the same spec, and guess what? It'll run just as good as the other ones that we just broke.
Yeah. I mean, that's what remember back in the day, even in the ICA days and stuff. I mean, every once in a while you get something that's just a little bit better. Just, it is what it is, but nothing that's like Gary said, that's like massive that you're like, whoa, this is something different. You're just like, on track, it maybe has a teeny bit more bottom end, or this just seems to work a little bit better. It's easier to find the carburation than another engine because of, maybe how the carburetor flows through that specific engine. But I mean, I'm in a total agreement. I think, and I think as a driver, Gary can attest to this because I think he's, especially for our age, he's probably the most knowledgeable person top to bottom in karting at our age. I think Alex Speed is another guy that's, we're in our mid 30s that has that broad range of knowledge, not just about chassis tuning, not just about engines, like everything there is to do about karting. And it is because of how we grew up. We grew up developing products, developing engines. Gary worked on the dyno. I went to Modena and visited him in Lonato, and he's like, dude, I'm trying to get out of here, but he's working on the dyno and learn. Not only is it his job, but he's also learning that and applying that now. And I think a lot of the kids now, it's just like, oh yeah, right. I mean, it is what it is. Like, their knowledge at an age is very little.
And Gary, I wanted to add on to that, right? So just like you said, Chris, I mean, you guys both came from that era where there was a lot more of developing motors and having the rule book a little more open. I come from, I'm you could call me still, even though I'm not far, but far enough where my era has strictly been spec racing. And I remember one of my first trips to the Supernats and the little stories you hear of like, yeah, when we go to Supernats in KZ, there's one motor that comes over in a suitcase and that motor's better than everybody else. But you've won the Supernats, Gary. Is there any truth to any of that stuff, even at the World Championships, of like guys getting just a superstar piece that nobody could even touch?
I mean, I guess I'm living proof. You always hear about, oh, if you're American, you never get anything that's good from Europe. Well, I mean, yeah, I won the Super Nationals twice. I had never won a race over in Europe, but I mean, was on podiums and everything. I mean, it's the same thing that it is in here in America and everywhere else in the world. the team's going to give the best stuff to who they think is going to win the race. I mean, that's how it is in any form of motorsport, right?
Right.
I mean, you can say that's happening from micro to KZ, right? I mean,
Right.
any team is going to give the best stuff to the driver they think is going to have the best chance of winning. But I mean, I had teammates and everything, and there's many times that I thought like, oh yeah, he's got a better engine, and you look at the data and you go, oh, well, I guess, many times it was Jeremy Iglesias. He made me feel really bad about myself because my engine was just as good as his. He was driving better than I was. So, I mean, and I guess.
Oh shoot! I think you might have got a call again.
Probably.
We'll wait on him for a second. I'll wait for him to come back. But I know that was like, I think I don't know, like maybe the logical fallacy was like that at least in the spec classes like that distance was lower, right? In some way or
Yeah.
another, like, the I don't know if that's the right way to put it even,
I mean,
where
back even like I raced in KF when KF first started, and we had some engines that were definitely a little bit better, but I think some of the engine builders that started to figure everything out, we were slow. So I think what happens is you have the people that develop and build this stuff in Europe, right? They're going to have a jump on any engine builder in America that's trying to then start working on that European engine. It's just the nature of the beast. You see it when the first new homologation comes out. Certain engine tuners that may have had helping in that homologation process have a little bit of an edge, but it all kind of evens out. And you saw that in ICA back in the day where, yeah, there were guys that came over with some engines, or if you were with a factory team, like I could get some engines brought over that were maybe a little bit better. But as we started to go, the engine builders that were fully committed to learning how to build these engines, they figured it out. Rainey's a perfect example of that. It's, there's times where, a new homologation comes out and you have to learn that engine. And yeah, if someone brings over an engine from Europe, it's going to be a little bit better. But if you know what you're doing, you're going to catch up, and you can't just say, 3 months in, 4 months in, be like, oh, well, this is unfair. This guy gets to bring an engine from Europe. Well, I mean, in reality, everyone can. A lot of people sell the engines. You may not get the absolute best stuff, but if we're racing at professional level, that's just the way it is,
Right. And so then to go back to you, Gary, again, going and racing KZ, I mean, the motors are, they haven't changed a whole lot, right? In terms of the formula for the last however many years. So, what we're seeing on the Pro Tour, is that a good idea of what we'll see at Supernats again this year with the, from SRP here with Amer in the States to Sweet Tech, to those guys being able to go head to head just again, like we saw last year with AJ versus the factory Burrell guys. It's the American builders are at that. It's not like that new edge or something new came out where the factories will have an edge. You think everyone's kind of stabilized a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. When I said it was hot here, my phone actually overheated. So it turned off. Yeah.
Well, all right.
Yeah. So now I put up against a Coke. I put in the freezer for a second, then I put a cold Coke can. So hopefully this doesn't works. But yeah. I mean, I think that's just it, right? I mean, I'm not an advocate of where, yes, open engines, KF or OK format, OK KZ format for the club races. I think we're just talking about national racing, like Chris said, like the SKUSA Pro Tour. I think every spec race, I'm not like this advocate like spec racing is bad and, it'll never work. I mean, yes, we have to have it for the club and even the SKUSA level. Because, I mean, what's kind of cool, I mean, what we see over in Europe is only professional manufacturers and not necessarily professional drivers, but let's just say a little bit higher level where they don't have the cadets and everything, where SKUSA, it's pretty cool that we do have that blend, right? I mean, where we have from the micros, the minis, even the masters and things like that. And then we have, our small niche of, let's say, professional drivers or high ranked drivers in the X30 and KZ categories. And I really think, there is a place in America for that. And yes, I 100% believe the American engine engine builders can run with the Europeans. And Rainey has showed it many times. I mean, SRP coming over and with the help of the Magic Boys. I mean, AJ put in a pole last year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah, he was
obviously,
quick.
I mean, the engine's not slow at all. And I think, I think a lot of times, people would always be, oh, the Europeans come over and they have these engines. And it's like, guys, they're just better drivers, period. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just, I mean, I guarantee they could jump in. Those guys that were used to be complaining about it, jump into their go-karts and be faster than them. And it was just kind of like an excuse at that point. But I mean, I've raced with kind of all over the world, and like the level of driving when you get to the KZ1 level, with the drivers that I was driving with at the time, I mean, they're at a whole nother level than what we see over here for whatever reason. I mean, there's could be a many factors, and I think actually the level, either one of two things have happened: either the level in Europe has maybe gone down, or as I hope from what I've seen, the level in America has gone up because we see more drivers in the mix. Where I remember when the Europeans started coming over here for the first time over in 2007. I mean, it was like the European drivers, a gap, and then the rest of the American drivers, and with a few American guys that could run with them in between. So it was a big, I would say, disparity. Now I think there's a little bit less, for whatever reason. You could say maybe there's the level in Europe's gone down, or the level in America has gone up, or a little bit above.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, I think there's no doubt that the level in America has gone up, right? I mean, that's been a talking point that we've had a little bit in a couple different angles, but mainly going on, the big thing everyone in racing likes to talk about is cost, right? I mean, 5-10 years ago, we weren't having test weekends before, national weekends nearly as prominent with nearly as many guys as we are right now. We're not having as many test days. Guys are getting more laps in go-karts to the level that the European guys are committed to, right? Where that stuff was second nature, a few years ago when we were just starting to dabble in it, for better or for worse. And, I'm sure having the Europeans come over and whoop up on us has probably pushed guys to get better, in the same way that as much as anyone may gripe in the X30 class of how good the RPG operation has been, that is, I think, without a doubt, forced everyone else to continue to try to raise their game to keep up with them. And the same way when having the Europeans come over, I think it's a fair point to say that it's caught up, or at least caught close, to compared to a handful of years ago where it wasn't that. I mean, the level of, tuning, even just the whole, kind of gang of misfits that's our batch of full-time tuners and driver coaches has, that pool's gotten bigger than 15-20 years ago. More guys coming to work for people, right? I mean, that's to the point that there's a massive shortage right now that every team is struggling to find more and more mechanics that's requested, and that's just where the ultimately the sport's kind of been steered. And it's always a good chicken or the egg question, right, of what's gotten us to this point of where we're at. But that's, I think, the direction we've been going. So I think that's at least fair to say for sure that it's caught up in a way.
Yeah, I think more drivers are getting over to Europe earlier too. I mean, when Gary and I were still racing full time, you maybe only had one driver each season that was spending, spending time over in Europe. That you were like, that was the American racing in Europe, or that was the Canadian racing in Europe. Now it's like there's 5 mini drivers, there's 1 or 2 juniors, there's 1 senior that's, in Europe committing, maybe not living over there, but they're going over back and forth. I remember just overhearing Jack Iliff's dad saying that, like, I think in July, they hadn't been home since like the beginning of May.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're just traveling back and forth from race to race, America, Europe. And you see, Harvick's over there now, and other drivers are following. And that's what really raises the game here. I don't think Europe's really dropped that much. I think maybe a little bit. But I think we have made a massive step forward in world motorsports.
Well, let's pivot a little bit then too. Like we talked about with this being the focus on national racing, in terms of shifter racing as a whole, right? Let's say KZ's the future and the way to go when, we talk club and regional stuff. Gary, are you the guy of belief that we should have, kind of a separate motor, but still have a lot of healthy shifter classes at the club and the regional level? Be it I don't know if the Rock is as good of a example, right? But if there was a counterpart like the old 80cc shifters were back in the day, or like where the Honda really capitalized on building a lot of numbers across the country, of having more of a budget oriented, be it spec or not, shifter motor, maybe tuned down a little bit, in a say.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think it should be something, more spec and probably just a little bit less horsepower, or something that would just make it a little bit more longevity. I mean, I know at least here I can only kind of really speak from what I saw here in the Sonoma Championship that we do, the Rock Championship. They have what they call a Masters Limited, and it's basically for the older gentlemen that don't necessarily want to be in a full-on, rock style 125 shifter, and then they're restricted, and it goes around about 2 seconds slower, I think, than a rock shifter, maybe less. I can't remember, but it slows it down quite a bit and makes it a lot more easier to tame, so to speak, and a lot more drivable. And I think, there is a place for that. But I mean, as much as I love shifter kart racing and everything too, I have to say, I think there necessarily doesn't need to be a shifter kart class at club level, because I think you can get enough experience with 20, 30 guys in a KA or an X30, and then you can maybe move up to a bigger category like in the SKUSA Pro Tour, or rock style races where there are shifter karts. I think shifter karts, you need quite a bit of experience, and it's not perfect for everyone to just hop in and jump in. And I think the European categories and the European way that they've done it for so long, where you can run OK or X30 and all that stuff. Like all these guys used to, go in cars like the Raikkonens and all those, let's say, like these older statesmen that are in Formula One. Some of them didn't even race shifter karts at all. So
Most didn't.
Right.
Most didn't, which I think you will learn more in a shifter kart. And I think if you get to that level, I think if you get to a level where you can drive a shifter kart, or you're trying to do a thing where you're trying to go into cars, you're at the level you're probably racing nationally anyways, and then you should go to shifter karts at least 1 year. I think it would help immensely for any driver that's trying to go into cars to do 1 year in shifter karts, like Verstappen, Leclerc, and all these big name drivers that are doing well in Formula One now, or any other form of motorsport. But at the grassroots level, does there need to be shifter karts? I think more for those masters guys that have been around for forever. For the younger crowd, no, I don't. I really don't think they're absolute needs. Need be. I think you can be you can take any driver out of KA 100 that's young. I mean, well, there was the one driver in Newcastle. I think he was out of a junior kart.
Parker DeLong.
Parker DeLong, and there was another one too, I think, in Newcastle that I saw that was running with the Bennett.
Oh,
boys.
Costello, Michael Costello.
Yeah. So it wasn't like he was, in the way. I mean, I've actually won the race. I mean, he was inside the top 15. It wasn't like he was out of control. He was able to pilot the go-kart just fine, right? But he's a driver that's been at the national level, right? So I think the club level should be getting you ready for the national level, and you get good at the national level, you go into the highest level of karting, which I believe is shifter kart racing. Skill set level.
Chris, were you laughing at the most recent comment that we just got in there?
Yeah, because it's like that's actually where Gary, not that that's like where our primes were, but like that's where we grew up racing. Like, first of all, I remember Scott's older than me, but I remember going to Pro Tour races when I was in 80cc shifter, and Scott was racing the pro category. I raced against AJ multiple times. Benny's actually a good friend of mine. I raced with his younger brother. Joey's a good friend of mine. He's older than both of us, never raced against, but it's like, yeah, man, like that. Maybe people don't know how old Gary and I are.
Maybe not. I mean, Gary was teammates with Scott's brother, Alex, at the very end of his full-time U.S. career. So, yeah, a little silly, but, Well, cool. Well, listen, we've got one more commercial break to hit. We're going to come back and continue a little more on this conversation. Then we got a lot of comments that came in over the post we put up earlier today about talking about events and promoters on this side. And since we haven't had Chris to talk on events as much, and Gary, while you're here, I'd love to hear your thoughts on a few of those comments as well that were sent in by people from all different levels, from the club to the national, international. So we'll be right back after this, everybody. Stick with us here. Casey Happy Hour number 58 rolls on. Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as Iami and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com. At New Gen Motorsport, we're committed to using our 10-plus years of experience and knowledge to help grow the sport of karting from the bottom up. Our goal is to make karting more accessible to the average person, lessening the financial burden of getting started, and making the learning curve as small as possible. Our passion is training and developing drivers, mechanics, and engineers to not only be the best they can be in karting, but also for careers in the much larger world of professional motorsports. A strong foundation makes building bigger easier. Let us be that foundation for your karting and motorsports career. Be part of the new generation of motorsport. Contact us today to schedule your test day, arrive and drive race event, or to inquire about how we can help get you started in your own new gen racing kart.
Don't settle for a national engine builder. Take care of yourself with an international one. SRP Engines is a global industry leader in engine services, specializing in engine formulas such as KZ, OK, OKJ, and Mini 60. SRP Engines is the engine of choice for Magic Kart USA and helped power North America's #1 ranked pro shifter driver AJ Myers to the 2021 SuperKarts USA Pro Tour National Championship. SRP Engines can also service any spec engine class of your choice, including Iami and Rock divisions. However, if you're looking for the absolute choice when it comes to KZ shifter engines, there is nobody better. For more information, contact Amr Sanada at srp-engines.com. KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the Rock Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. Rock Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full Rock Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back here to KC Happy Hour, episode number 58. Here we're waiting on get everybody back on in. So, Gary, one comment you had right before the break, or a little bit before the break, that I thought was interesting. You mentioned was that the American top level series, SKUSA, right, and USPKS in both cases. I mean, you could say SKUSA even a level above because it does have shifter and USPKS doesn't. But in either case, that it's a blend, right? That we've got kids classes, that we have masters classes, that we've got, per se, more amateur or semi-pro or road to pro divisions along with our headline divisions. And do you like that our races are formatted like this? Because at least to me, I feel like we kind of are almost taboo about how we talk about these races, especially like when we talk about budget or cost or like which way. I feel like we're one foot in one door and one foot in another. In some cases with these events, we're trying what we can to limit the sets of tires, or to say like this class is, a spec class, right? We're saying, all right, well, open the testing weekends up. We can run more, but, spec engine, and I feel like we're halfway in an amateur mindset and then halfway in like a pro class mindset. But do you like that it's the blend of the mix of classes? Or I don't know. I don't even feel like even in the classes outside of when we talk about it on this show, when everyone else thinks about those events, it's one blended, molded thing together. In terms of to you, like, do you like how like the series format has these, these extra kids in the master stuff? Because I feel like I don't know. I mean, obviously the numbers aren't there. Maybe they would get there to prove it that they should be separated, right? How they were maybe 15 years ago with, you know, amateurs and every class at IKF Grands, and then Stars at Karting just had pro classes. And now we've kind of got them halfway together. You know, I feel like we're halfway together, and maybe it's not as good for the sport. I don't know. What do you think?
I actually like it. I know actually in all the, when we used to come to Vegas, I guess, well, when I used to come from Vegas from doing all the European rounds, I thought it was cool to see the little kids and everyone just kind of all together, because it's, I think one, it makes it easy for teams now being a team owner. If we did any more racing now, I mean, I give up. I give up. It's every weekend. So like, just to say like, okay, now we're going to do 2 different weekends where it's kids, and then I'm like, no, we need less racing. We need, I think, more big races that all the classes are there, and we can do, you know, more bigger races one at a time, or one maybe every month, and then be able to actually take our clients out to test and learn and do things like that, where I don't have to, you know, go from race to race to race, because there's, you know, one series is more based, you know, with this engine and then that engine, and then it's a pain in the butt as a team owner, and like you basically end up having to tell a quarter of your customers every weekend, like, no, I can't make it because I have to be over here or I have to be over there. Yeah. So I actually like it in the sense of, I think it's really cool for the micro kids that you can literally put him right next to a KZ guy or a top level guy like a Norberg or a Formal or a Kyle Wick or whoever you want to say. You can put the kid right next to him and have him learn from him. Like, how cool is that? Right? I think that's great. I think that's cool how we do that in the States. But I think, yeah, there always is a little bit of disconnect where you maybe have a set of micro drivers that think they're at a pro race and they're professional because they're watching the X30s and things like that. Yes, there is a little bit of disparity there. Like, yes, these kids are learning, and yeah, it's a pro race, but I mean, they're 8 years old, right? I mean, they're not pros. So yeah, there's that little bit disconnect. And I mean, I don't know if it's something as simple as the series saying like, these are our amateur classes and these are pro classes, and it's amateur, you know, just like I guess motorcycles do, right? They have the pro class and the amateur class, but it's the supercross or, you know, whatever. Maybe it's something as simple as that, is just wording it different, and then puts maybe more perspective in people's minds. But no, I think it's great to have them both, because being someone that would just race over in Europe, I raced over in Europe all the time, and it was only seeing kind of the pro guys, and then going over to Vegas, I thought it was really neat having everyone together, because you can literally sit right next to your hero and be under the tent with him, where in any other racing, I mean, where can you just, you know, if you were in Formula One, it's not like, you know, the F3 guy is sitting there right next to Lewis Hamilton, you know, learning from him, where in go-karting, at least here in America, you can literally have that. And what's cooler than that, right? I mean,
that's a fair point. I think that's a good thing. I don't think we even consider, probably we take for granted over here, right? For having all those extra classes around. I mean, Chris, what do you think? You know, we've talked about this a little bit on the show too.
Yeah, I think Gary and I are a little disagreements on this, and I think maybe a little bit agreements also. But I just think that we need to get back to where we don't necessarily, like, micros, I don't think have any reason to be traveling around the country doing, you know, 8 to 10 races all over the country, West Coast, East. Like, at that age, it should just be about having fun, learning the fundamentals of the sport. I see sometimes how serious some of the parents and everyone take it, and I think it's a little too much. I think the KA classes don't need to be on a national tour as well. I think, you know, that could help improve the regional and local programs, you know, that, you know, if you want to race KA and that's where you want to be, like we talked about in that episode, 3 weeks ago, you know, I think one of the reasons why you see X30 starting to not die, but have less entrance is because you have the ability to go enter another category, you know, and it's not a step up into KZ, right? It's really it is a step down. I mean, you're taking a step down. And if you're in this to improve as a driver, you know, I think you need to keep trying to move up and move up in toughness, in the competition and the speed and the technicality of it. And I think if we structure it just a little bit differently, you can still have these races where we have everyone together, right? Like a Miami National, Super Nats, have another national championship race where you do have all the categories together, like Gary said, because Gary makes a great point. It is something very special that we have that you don't really see anywhere else in the world. Yes, the Italian championship, you have, all the categories, maybe at the UK, the British championship, you have all the categories, but that's still not the top level of racing. It's the top level of racing in that country, which I guess you could say is ours as well. But it's very rare in karting around the world that you get to be in the same pit spot, have that same teammate that is the top driver and one of the best drivers in the world. Because we do have some guys over here that if you were to put the best drivers in the world, they are elite. And, you don't have that ability everywhere else. But I do think we could structure a little bit differently. I don't think our national championships that travel around the country should have a micro and the KA categories.
Well, I remember I talked to Joe Janowski about, when the SKUSA Pro Moto Tour started, right? And it was senior only, it was strictly the Pro Moto shifters. And I remember he'd mentioned, and I think it was him. I could be mixing my names up here that I had talked to you about this, but the idea of it more so being like the World of Outlaws coming to a local short track. And so the World of Outlaws are there, and all the local weekly classes still got to run and pit in the same garage area as all the World of Outlaws guys, but they're running their local championship there. And I've said it on the show in a similar format that, like, I feel like USPKS is an example here at 5 races, even though the spread isn't all the way to the West Coast. The West we're going to go is Texas. That having those, let's call them amateur classes, not to be mean to any of the parents or the kids there, but there's not a better term, and I don't know if I like the word semi-pro, but they're ladder classes, and those classes are regional championships, and you could have their regional, like it's a USPKS season or a SKUSA season if SKUSA, let's say, had 4, and you could have them meet up at one race, and SKUSA's meetup could be the Super Nats, but an East and a West champion in mini and micro and K junior and K senior. You can still have those classes there, and if you're worried about entries, you could still make it where you could go and run outside your region and show up. You just don't score points, kind of like how the NASCAR Cup guys show up in Xfinity. But maybe then it would open the door maybe a little bit to, like, then the teams aren't worried, like from Gary's point of view, right? You're trying to fill the tent up with customers and with clients. And if, we're wanting to field a pro guy and sponsor a guy or two on your team to go and run your brand up front in the pro class, you're not just losing your butt because that's the only class that's there, right? You can still have all those other classes there and have them in the tent too, but maybe not have them where they're forced to feel like they have to follow the entire season, an East and a West mini champ. And then again, going on wanting to get guys to follow up the ladder to get all the way up to the top from a driver development side. If they still want to go to cars, right? They're not leaving into cars at the age of 12 and whatever car they want to test for 2 years, test an F4 car for 2 years and then go road to Indy racing. They're not saying they were a mini national champion. They were the mini East champion, the mini West champion, or maybe some crazy guy decided to try and run both. And for whatever reason, the rules let them run both. But in that way, the events stay the same. The fill is the same, but the national championship regard and that pro level regard is kind of held up to the higher classes anyway, because that's when you have more of, I feel like, a mix of parents unsure of how much budget they want to allocate to their kid's racing career, because you don't know if that kid's going to love it for life at 8 years old. You might think he might. It looks like he might. And at 15, he might discover girls and say, screw this. And
Xander, I literally had this conversation with someone today for like a long conversation with a potential client of mine. And we literally had that conversation where the dad was like, I don't know. I understand the cost of racing. I've been in motorsports for a long time. I don't know if I want to go down this rabbit hole where I'm going to spend $1 million over the next 5 years. You just throw numbers out, but I'm going to spend $1 million over the next 5 years to realize that my 15-year-old 5 years down the road goes, I'm over it. And the dad's like, but you were just into this 2 years ago and now we're not. And I just wasted X amount of money on this. So I think you're onto something there where it's like, we do need to almost protect the parents from not knowing sometimes. And Gary, I'm sure Gary has to do this being a team owner where, you have parents that come in and they're like, they got these big aspirations and they hear these stories and you're like, whoa, let's just settle. So I'd love to take your money, but let's just settle down. I don't need you to be out of this sport in 2 years because you blew your wad and are like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, you didn't have to spend this much.
Yeah.
No, 100%. I mean, it's managing expectations and just probably trying to figure out what the end goal is for a lot of parents and young drivers and everything. And I mean, a little bit off topic, but I guess when it comes back, when we could say like, semi-pro to pro or however we want to say it, when you do have like these open, like not open, but like, let's say, multi-manufactured style classes for pro guys, like what Sanders said, like a guy who wants to get sponsored and everything. When you do have this opportunity, a driver can get sponsored with engines also.
Yes.
And I'm a perfect example of that. I was running with Track Magic. We had our own engine program. It was, let's just say, off. It was we were always lacking a little bit on the engine side, and it was always a thing of like, well, this is the cost, and we don't really want to do more, put any more cost in developing the engines. We want to do it all in the chassis, and we just have to deal with it. And I was lucky enough where Maxter at the time was a brand of engines that made KZ and ICA and Formula A engines. And they wanted to get outside because they were a CRG based company, and they wanted to get on other go-karts other go-karts that were not manufactured on CRG. I was that lucky recipient where they offered me engines. Rainey gave me help with tuning the engines, and Maxter gave me parts. Boom. I had an engine program. I had a kart program, and I was able, a driver that at that time where I had just finished high school, my parents weren't helping me. I was on my own, and I had a full factory-fledged ride from manufacturer support. They were literally giving us engines, and guess what? Like, it jump-started my career. If I wouldn't have done that season, I'd probably be working at PG&E or something. I wouldn't even be in the sport. Let's just be real. And like so many drivers, we can say like, okay, and I see it with myself. I have to promote GSC. We have to have good drivers, and you have to maybe give deals to people that drivers like cannot afford to do it. Well, when you have a spec engine, you don't get any help on the engine side either, and it cuts half the industry of where people like engine builders, engine manufacturers, and everything else. You just cut them out, which I don't think is a bad thing. Having spec things for, like I said before, spec for I grew up on spec engines. We had the Comers, we had the Yamahas, and all that stuff. It was IKF, but for the national level guys who are trying to make a living in karting, or even just trying to make it up to the motorsports ladder but don't have the budget, if you can run a pro class where you can have open engine manufacturers and have a little bit more leniency, you're going to get guys that are going to get sponsored by engine manufacturers or kart manufacturers and all this that might get a chance where in spec racing they will not. I mean, I literally made a career because I had help from Maxter. At that time, Track Magic closed. I had help from CRG. The manufacturer came over, watched me race in Vegas. I won the race in Vegas. The team owner from CRG was Daniel Rossi at the time. Said, hey, man, I think you got what it takes to race over in Europe. I got a test. I did a test. Boom. After the test, they signed me as a factory driver. That does not happen in spec racing. No one is going to support a driver. Ryan Norberg has won 5 national championships, and he's not been approached by a manufacturer because he races in an X30 category. I guarantee if he was racing in an OK category or a KZ category and winning all these races, he'd have been approached by a manufacturer. He'd probably be racing in real full time if he wanted to. I guarantee it. It happened with Jordy. It happened with me, Jordy Vorath. I think you probably remember, Chris. It happened with yourself. There's so many drivers back in our day that they were getting support from manufacturers of engine and chassis side that got opportunities to race in Europe where now they won't.
Right.
And that's for pros. This is for pros only. That's and that's how it should be, right? I mean,
well, and that makes it, again, going back to, like what I think we could be, right, for your spec classes, or at least, your ladder classes of kids classes and masters, right? Then if they're running the regional, all right, your focus is on controlling the cost because you know you're not going to get that other 50% of the industry to sponsor them. But then then if the pro classes are multi-manufacturer where you have another whole world of potential sponsor and advertising dollars that could go into covering the cost, I feel like the focus of trying to limit the cost in this class doesn't have to be as high of a priority because, yeah, okay, it might cost me, double the money because we're racing twice as much to go run pro shifter for all 5 weekends. But you're hopefully getting twice as much help, on the back end side from the engine manufacturer side or more, if you have those guys playing in. I mean, it goes on the same thing of like, we've been talking purse money on here a lot, right? We only want the purse money for those pro class. We don't want to have kids racing for money, right? But in the same way, the purse money, right, goes back on to it. The engine manufacturers support them. The chassis guys support them. And then if you're a team owner, it's like kind of going to Vegas and playing the odds. If you know that all you got to do is get the guy into the top 5 and you make your money back, you're getting your advertising revenue from that guy putting your team up front. And if he's good enough, he can negotiate deals both on commission base for the purse money or in a guy like Ryan Norberg's case, let's say X30 was like that and there was a fat payout that went to the top 5. He could probably negotiate a flat rate from a team saying, I know, with where I'm at, I can get you into the top 5. There's no question you're going to make a return. So you're going to pay me a flat rate no matter where I finish. You know what I mean? But that goes back on like that, separating the mindset of how we look at these classes instead of kind of halfway grouping them together. And it's like, well, we're doing this because this is the right way to go. We're paying some of the pro classes some money, but also we're spec with the classes. And then we're limiting some practice or we're wanting to make KA run 1 set of tires for the weekend, but we're practicing on Thursday, so how much are we really saving money? And then there's all kinds of arguments. I feel like that more so try to Band-Aid it. But I think if you rip the Band-Aid off and you're like, this is the sandbox for this class. If you want to go race this class, this is the sandbox for this class. I feel like we'd be at least a little bit more with everybody on the same page because I don't think everybody that shows up at these big races is on the same page. And we could see it sometimes in the comment sections when we talk about these guys. Parents want to go and race, with their kid at the most competitive, environment they can put them in. That's great, and the numbers of the K are bigger than X30. You have a bunch of different people that all want different things, and I feel like it's because the events and the way that we're talking about everything is like in just generic way. It's the same thing that irks me about like race directors that are like, I just want you to go out there and play clean. It's like, no. Can I do this to block or can I do that to block? Can I move a guy out of the way to get a position or not? Like, tell me what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do. I don't have to agree with it, but that's my choice to race in your race or not, Yeah. I feel, I don't know. I wish we were more straightforward in this country in some ways,
Well, I mean, in reality, and Gary knows this, the biggest issue we have in American karting is we don't really have a structure to karting and how it needs to be run, from the categories that we run, the rules across the board to ages. It's like I went up to Canada and there's kids still running mini and junior in the same weekend. And you're like, how is this still, like, I remember when that happened here in America for like a year or two and people were like, whoa, why are we allowing this? And I was like, how are we allowing this? How are we allowing a 13-year-old kid to run junior and then go race against 9, 10-year-olds?
Yeah.
Like,
we're even having people up in arms when guys do that in different series or at a regional or a national level, right? If a kid runs junior regional and then runs mini national, there's people that gripe about that. And then series owners will do that. So at least we're better on that front. Because we're, I think, a tier removed.
But we really need more, like, that's, I think, in my opinion, I think a lot of these issues arise from us not having you could call it karting czar, as much as we complain about the FIA. That if you have experience over there, there are a lot of benefits to kind of having some czar that really puts a structure together that allows the promoters to work within, right, to create their product within that kind of framework. There is no framework. So, that's why you have these, well, should we do money races? Should we not do money races? Should we have pro racing? Should we have this? Should we have that? If we could just have a little bit more structure, I think it would really help drive the sport in the right direction.
Well, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, on my side, I mean, I guess I really don't know. I mean, I've seen it a million times, but just being a driver myself, the 2 times that I won the Super Nationals, I didn't realize I'd won money until they brought out the check. So they just to put it in perspective, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't like, oh my God, I just won 10 grand. I didn't even realize.
I won the
So, like,
Supernats.
I won the Supernats. I'm happy I'm this, and they bring up, oh yeah, I won 10 grand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess we do it for the drive. The drivers are the driving base of our. It's not like we have businesses, but we have small manufacturers, but it's like not like Formula One where Mercedes and drivers are more employees. Where in go-karting, if a driver doesn't want to go to a race, there's not a manufacturer telling them you have to go to this race.
You're not being paid enough.
Yeah. In America, right?
Yeah.
So you're there because you want to be. The drivers are racing because they want to be racing. And I guess my 2 cents is like, yeah, the time of that I won big money, I totally forgot there was even money to win until they brought out the check. So, I mean, I'm not going to comment much on it because I've seen and heard and gone around this story a million times, and I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm kind of at a loss. I've seen good ways of doing it. I've seen bad ways of doing it, but I think I guess my 2 cents is until we start doing it completely differently, because I've seen it done the same way, but a little bit different, but it's really the same thing.
Yeah.
And if we're doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, that's insanity, right? So until we come out and do something completely different that could change things and shake things up, I mean, I will probably end up having the same result.
Gary, I have a question because you're a manufacturer now. And I've talked to Stefani about this and CompCard and J3 and Giacomelli's and some other guys. You know, we used to have a lot of American manufacturers, you know, it's because of Track Magic. I raced for Invader and was a driver for them for years. I feel like in some ways we are the largest karting market in the world. That's a specific market, right? Why we don't take more control over our, and maybe I don't know, you know this because you're buying and bringing products over, you know more about this. Do we have enough numbers here to really create our own industry to kind of take control of our own destiny in a way? Or do you not think that that's possible?
And to just get everyone together is
right. We've tried that before.
Yeah. And I think what you see with the manufacturers over in Europe, that they do get together. They actually do. So I think it's a thing of a mentality, really. I think there's no governing body, so it's kind of like the wild, wild west out here, and people are just going to do what they want. And I mean, it's just the mentality over in Europe. I think they have collectively worked together for the most part. I mean, there was a thing where we all remember about, well, not all of us remember, but sure you remember, Chris, when the FIA put out a statement, 4-stroke only. Well, all the manufacturers got together, and they'd be like, I guess in our day and age, if SKUSA or NKA said no 2 strokes, impossible to run 2 strokes, it has to be 4-stroke for all karting categories. Well, all the manufacturers got together and said, nope, not gonna happen.
It happened this year. It happened this year with the calendar. They put out some crazy calendar. The teams are like, kind of like you said earlier in the podcast, Gary, like, if I have any more races, I'm going to go insane. I'm leaving the sport. It is starting to get like that in Europe, and they put out a calendar this year. FIA and WSK kind of has to put their foot down. RGMMC is with the FIA, so they're doing their thing. And the team straight up were like, they came together and sent their own calendar back to the organizers and said, these are the races we will be participating in. You're more than welcome to hold your race. We will not be attending your race. And it was signed by literally 90% of the teams and manufacturers out there. And they changed the schedule.
And I guess the same goes for when they try to have the World Championships in Brazil. Was it in 2020 or during COVID and everything? All the manufacturers just said, nah, we're not going to do it.
Not doing it.
Because of the cost and everything at that time, and all the manufacturers kind of suffering from the COVID year. So I think, I mean, we've seen it many times over there, and I don't think we've seen it here. And I think it's just the mentality. I mean, I've been now, being a team owner, I've been to some of those meetings in SKUSA and Rock and all this, where we get all the teams together, and unfortunately it goes absolutely nowhere. For whatever reason, I mean, people can blame me, I can blame somebody else, and in the end, nothing gets resolved regardless.
It's been like that forever,
do you think that's partly because the only team owner meetings we've ever seen are organized by the series, right? Like what you're describing, Chris, sounds like the teams got into each other.
They haven't though, maybe recently, but we've had. I only know this because of when I was a team manager for Top Kart for a couple of years, and I was involved in that side of things. We've had meetings that were put together, or brought a couple of team owners like, we need to get this together, right? And everyone comes, but it's just look, it's an American mentality. It's what's made us so successful in America. We have our opinions and we stick to them, and sometimes we don't give in and go, like, yeah, you have a point there. I can work with you on that, but I need, it's like, no, this is what I believe. No, I'm out the door. So I don't think that's always because it's run by the series. I think that's a majority of the problem. I think we could do more of team owners coming together and team managers coming together and saying, hey, let's have our own little meetings. We need to, once a month, connect, have a Zoom, whatever. If it's not at a track, let's just have our bullet points, come to the series, once a quarter, end of the year. Hey, this is what we'd like to see. If we don't see it, we're not going to give you business. And it's that plain and simple. The problem is, and always boils down to this, and you hear it all the time. Well, my customers want to do this, this, and this, so I'm going to have to not do what I originally said. I'm going to
not going to hold the line.
And then every other person goes, well, I guess I'm going to have to do the same thing now.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that could be because naturally the manufacturers, or big karting manufacturers, necessarily don't need their race team to keep their business flowing. Yep. Their business is to sell go-karts, and hence, that's the biggest reason why I started GFC. Is I hope to, in many years, to be able to, not necessarily have a race team to fund my business or be a big income of my business, as much as it's just as an advertisement / development platform for my product. And I think that's the biggest difference that we have in Europe, where that's when they do these big, like, international races, it's more, they're not necessarily making a lot of money going to those races as much as they're spending it and using it as an advertisement / development platform. Where here in the States, we have importers and a lot of, let's be real. All of us right now, if we close down our racing team and with this service, we probably would not make it, throughout the year, we'll be able to do it. Hence, that's why I'm trying to do something completely different, because I'm kind of this under the my mentality is like, if I try to do the same as everybody else did, I'm going to get the same results, right? I could maybe do it different, but being trying to be a manufacturer like what I'm doing now is my biggest difference of trying to expand. And now we're trying to even getting outside like North America, like someone like a J3 has done, and they've built a great business and a great brand, and kudos to them. Where, as you can see, they really don't have a national race team because they can fund it. Their business can go on without it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's wrap it here, Gary. I know we're running a little past where you were hoping to be, so I apologize about that.
Problem.
I know no problem. But so I do want to give some of our viewers, we got some questions that have come in here that we'll hit a little bit, but some of them I think we've talked about a little bit before. So let's switch to events, right? You've already made the one comment earlier, right? If there were more races on the calendar, you'd be done. You'd throw it up. We're already racing a ton. I know you were at the Rockfest West up at Sonoma, right? Which was, a little bit bigger than the normal club championship, right? But for even these 3 events over the weekend, we had 2, we had a touring series, we had the Rock Island Grand Prix, a couple hours apart. The Texas guys at the Lone Star Grand Prix down there was pretty light. So from an event standpoint, let's kind of distinguish them. There's one way to do a national. There's one way to do more of a standalone regional or series like that. Is there anything you think that you could do different if you were putting on an event? Chris, I'll put the question to you. Like, then what's being done right now? If, let's say, your hat all of a sudden changes to being an event promoter, having listened to all these clients and customers, like, do you think there's anything different these guys could be doing or that you would do to make your event stand out more than anybody else?
I think format, maybe just being a little bit more creative with the format is maybe the biggest thing. I agree with Gary. The prize money is great, but in all honesty, like, I still am a firm believer that karting is the end all be all. It's a stepping stone into motorsports. It would be amazing if we could work towards having more professionals more professional drivers. But I mean, look, best case scenario, even in Europe these days, you know, you're making 35, 40,000 euro a year racing go-karts. So that's best case scenario. It's not like the old days. So yeah, I mean, we'd love to see it's just never going to be that. So we need to create better events that, you know, where we can just have more, that's the best way to put it. Like, just, it's not the same old for everyone that's in the industry, right? I think SKUSA, USPKS, they all do a great job. I haven't been to a Stars race yet. They all do an amazing job at what they do. But like Gary said earlier, it's just all the same. Like, no one is really doing anything different. And we really need something different. And it's engines, it's the way the races run, like actual, like how many finals we have, you know, whether or not they're doing like at PF at the Kart Masters this year, they actually did some of the heat races P-pick draw. They did some heat races based on where you qualified, some heat races based on P-pick draw. Things like that can really create difference is what we need.
What about you, Gary? What is there anything, whether it's national event or, you know, in a regional race like the Rockfest West, that like something they could do to get more, you know, more people that want to go?
I mean, it's first off, if I had to be a promoter, I'd quit. But I'd quit right away. I don't envy those guys' jobs at all. I'd much rather be in the position I am now. But I think, yeah, to touch on Chris said, I mean, it'd be cool to just see something a little different. I think, you know, there's always races like the Super Nationals that don't need changing. It's been the prestige and that's what you need. But like it would be, I think if we could change it up, how to have ideas. I mean, I guess that's not my forte. You know, I put all my focus, all my ideas are based on how to make go-karts go faster. But I think having maybe instead of, I think it'd be cool to see actual promotion.
Yeah.
I think we have event promoters, but there's no really promotion about it. There's just, you know, where they put on events and the promotion is little bit of just putting it on Facebook or whatever in Instagram. But I mean, we have this niche market. I mean, I would think, you know, obviously go-karting is not, and even back in the day, it's still expensive. It was always expensive, always been expensive. So you have a target audience that's, you know, kind of in a luxury industry.
Yeah.
So you would think you could target and promote, you know, with big companies, you know, that are in the luxury industry and trying to cross promoters or something like that and get big corporate sponsors or do something different where people like myself are not, you know, every promoter is just coming up to manufacturers or teams asking for sponsorship. Like, let's try to get some outside sponsorship or something. I mean, and maybe they've done it and maybe they tried, or maybe they're not promoting it or selling their product well enough. I think that's the difference. Like, I want to see something completely different. I want to see, I don't know, a big title sponsor, or where, you know, if you have just pro events and, you know, rental carts where you're taking out, you know, big CEO clients, or, I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of promoters that come on here and say, oh, we've done it. It doesn't work. It doesn't do that. It's like, okay, but I mean, have we really tried something different? And I don't have that big idea myself, but I'm hoping in my lifetime, in my business career in karting, that I do see that one big idea, and I hope someone becomes very successful at it, because I think if they become very successful at it, and everyone else in the industry can be successful as well.
I'll say this. I actually got lucky enough to be invited to a local elementary school here today to do like a career on wheels event. And, you know, there's fire truck, police officer, other cool things that kindergartners think is really cool. I show up with my helmet, pair of gloves, and a trophy, right, out of the back of my car, essentially. I don't have really anything that I think is that cool. Multiple kids texted my kind of correspondent at the school that they thought I had the coolest presentation to them. But we don't do anything to try to get these kids in. And I'm like, I show them a book with a go-kart in it and said, hey, 5-6 years old, this is about the age you can start getting into karting. And I saw multiple kids, their eyes just absolutely light up. And I asked how many kids have seen racing on TV. More than half of them usually raise their hand. That's the promotion that Gary's talking about that we don't do.
And one thing to touch on that, like, it's always expected of the teams almost. Like, oh, you guys should go out and promote. Like, your job description is literally called promoter. Am I right? I mean, I'm a team owner and a manufacturer, not a promoter.
Right.
So that's where that disconnect. It's like, I think there's a disconnect there. I think, like, yes, we should all work together. I'm not saying like, okay, it's only the promoter's job. Yes, could I do a better job? But I mean, I think there's got to be a two-way street here.
Yeah, I think it's I think everyone in the industry right now, right, with how set, like I think without a question right now, we got so many races going on. And that's, I think, the number one reason this weekend the numbers were spread a little bit. And as a whole, even for the races that weren't going on this weekend, probably pulled drivers away from anyone that races past weekend, or these guys this past weekend would pull guys away from the Newcastle test the next weekend. I had a message from a parent saying about how, they're thinking they're going to have to make a decision of what race they put more money into, the Miami Grands in 3 weeks and go to GoPro the week before, or if they go to Newcastle this weekend and test for the Summer Nationals. From a promoter's side, that's a busy schedule too. In the industry, I don't know if it's ever really righted itself where we've had so many events all of a sudden closed down. We've it gets a little bit smaller. Promoters dial back a little bit. Series get a little bit. We never get small enough that then they have enough time on their hands to go out and okay, they really need to go out and promote outside of it without a kickstart of some extra funds to maybe hire some more outside people, which is the other thing. I think that's a bit of the issue is that every promoter in the sport is a lifer karting guy, right? F1, I believe a big reason of why their growth has been skyrocketed in the last decade is because they got bought by a media company instead of run by Bernie Ecclestone, who was a career F1 guy after he got the media rights for the last 40 years.
Good point.
We don't have outside people coming in. I mean, I know for me, right? You could say that to me. You could say I'm not a media guy by trade. I'm a karting kid that announced because I learned how to do that just for fun in my room playing with Hot Wheels cars and sim racing, and then over time started to learn how to do it. But I try to spend every day that I can learning from outside of the sport. I'm not going to get any better at doing the media we do, doing the show the way that we do, doing the broadcast that we do by looking at what everyone else is doing in karting or just trying to brainstorm on my own. There's the ideas of, the world's so big and it's so easy to access information. I think all the ideas are out there, maybe not in our sport and the people in the same way, but to get those people and those kind of mindsets in, I think would either come from an angel investor coming in behind a program that would want to put some money towards that direction, or which I don't think this would happen, if a series got to be, and we had so small and the events, schedule for the year got small enough that these guys had more off weeks in between to go and not only put in the time to organize an event and go and promote it and go around, in the town, meet with the city council, the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, I had a meeting earlier today with Tom and Alexis from SKUSA because we're trying to figure out, how we're going to stream the Supernats. And, I'm trying to spend all the days that I have at home, figuring out how I can make sure that's going to be a banger live stream for us and raise the bar, utilize the Jumbotron that was there last year, do some extra segments, do all that. But, even then I'm gone last weekend, going to be gone in 2 weeks to Summer Nats. And for those guys, they were coming back from SKUSA Mexico last week. And then this week, they're going over to California for SKUSA ProKart Challenge. So I agree. I think the promoters, right, their name is promoter, but right now I think a more accurate name is event organizer because that's what 90% of their time is going into is organizing each event because we're doing so many events. But I think if someone did that, that would be the one way you'd get kind of a czar in the country in the same way that it happened for the Moto World once with Supercross. And now it's happening again with the World Supercross Championship, where some guys coming in doing something so badass, so much eyeballs and hype behind it, the right amount of money in the right places behind it from sponsorship that it's attracting all the manufacturers and teams to go to that new product. I mean, Supercross has been the highest paying motocross championship for the last couple decades because the viewership, TV viewership, eyeballs, number of bikes bought because of whatever manufacturer won the championship, eclipse the FIM World Outdoor Motocross Championship. So the guys are making more money to run Supercross, then it will go FIM Outdoor, then it will go American Outdoor. And now Supercross is getting eclipsed by the World Supercross guys. So that's at least a way. I saw some comments coming in asking, one guy said, one coming up here was a little bit ago. I'm trying to find the exact one, but he's like, I've been in karting. Here we go. This is from Garrick Miller. Said 25 years ago, I didn't think we needed something like the FIA, but now I have no doubt that we need that sort of oversight. And whether we need it or not, how that would come to play right now, I don't know if we'd get that, right? Just off what you said, Chris, that Americans are going to stick by their opinions. And what would be the draw to join the FIA if you could pick up 20 guys that are FIA defectors?
So if Gary was, Gary, this is when Gary really burst onto the scene. But when we had that kind of premier, there was no question. This is the premier series. We had outreach. We had sponsors from outside of the karting industry with Stars of Karting. Paul Zalud was not a karting guy. He hired a team that were not karting people. They were with an actual agency that worked on karting. And look, did the series go away? Yes, it did. But, in reality, we had a good decade about really solid years of premier karting. And that karting can come back. It's not one thing or the other, but I do think, just like Gary was saying, and just like you were saying, Xander, if we have someone outside the box, outside of that karting industry that comes in and says, I see an opportunity here, let's make this happen. I mean, really, we need SKUSA maybe to lead you, Gary, and take over. And maybe we'll have an opportunity there.
Yeah, and not listen to guys like us. That didn't go karting and see. I have plenty of bad ideas. Yeah, and I think that's just it. Like, I'll be the first one to say I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. I know I'm good at what I do with the go-karting, like developing the go-karts and running a team and everything. I'm not a promoter. I'm not going to act like I'm a promoter. I'm not going to sit here in all these meetings like, oh, we should do this, we should do that. Like, I got no schooling in that, and I think Xander hit it on the head. I mean, you took Liberty Media made Formula One way bigger than it's probably ever imagined to be, and I bet you that company knew what all they knew about Formula One is they have 4 tires, on the cars. I think it is going to take someone outside the industry because, like I said before, and I sound like a broken record, but we keep on doing the same thing. We're just going to get the same result. And listening to team owners like myself who are just go-kart rats, it's probably not going to help. We just all have the same ideas because we only know what we've seen or studied. And all I know about is how to make an engine or a chassis or a driver or a teamwork. That's all I know. So I don't think getting all the teams together and, coming together and getting ideas, obviously what they've done, it obviously hasn't worked.
Yeah. There was even a comment kind of on that, right? This was from Coffee on YouTube saying, would it help if SKUSA, USPKS, et cetera, work to schedule events so the nearby tracks raced after each other? They actually do. So we talk about like lowering costs. All of them do. All the promoters do at least work together on dates, but that's the bare minimum, trying to make it where at least the teams can leave rigs in certain places. Like there is a, schedule. If you're, RPG, PSL, all the speed concepts, all the major teams that travel around following all the big races, there's kind of an unofficial circus that goes, everybody would go to Florida and go park at the NASCAR Homestead Speedway for 2 months. And I know this because I worked there, and I'd see the PSL rig over Christmas and I'd be like, the Canadians aren't here, but they'd go and they'd leave the rig at that track and then go to the next track, leave the rig there. It's how Florida Winter Tour work with 2 back-to-back weeks at the same racetrack. It was really healthy. So there is that helps. But that's the bare minimum. That's stuff we've seen before. That's making our lives easier operationally. It's not necessarily bringing stuff to a new level. And I wanted to highlight this comment that came in that says, I need to keep working on viewership because we could be better for karting to strike a TV deal. No pressure. So appreciate that, Ashley. Thanks for tuning in. I also, while the guy, everyone was coming in talking about my light, I did turn my light on. It got dark outside. So anyway, but I mean, good stuff from it all, right? Like, I think that's honestly probably a better response from both of you guys, I think, than what we could going through a lot of these questions, or comment by comment. I think a lot of people, we've The Lone Star race had a big cash purse from an outside sponsor, from a guy that was just a karting member at the racetrack. A trucking company threw up 30 grand there, but promotion wise, Alan was busy running the race team, running the track. He even admitted he's like, I was behind, didn't promote the event well enough. Unfortunate. Rock Island, they've got NK promoting to a degree. NK is not the promoter of the event. They have a seat at the board, which kind of limits them on the budget side, unfortunately. They're doing some cool stuff with the Stars side, and I've talked about them. I think they're exciting, Chris. I know you haven't been at their events yet, but to me, what's exciting about the Stars guys is exactly what we talk about here. We talk about, having the idea to think outside the box. They're not limited to anything. They're run by the NK, so they can do whatever they want. And to finish the comment I had a little bit, or at least elaborate on it, when I say like angel investor, Gary, you're a prime example, right? Like there is not room in the way your business operates, and you are 7 days a week, pretty much full-time, race to race, to hire a marketing guy. There's not that room. And unfortunately, as much as we complain about the cost of these events and think everybody's getting rich, I mean, these guys are still really busy. I don't know the back end. I'm not saying I've seen the books of these series. When the series are doing good and they're getting 250 entries and 300 entries, yeah, they're profiting good, but that doesn't take into account the bad years. USPKS had a really bad couple of years not too long ago, so there were years that they lost as well. But is there room for those guys to have a $60,000 to $80,000 salary more for a good marketing salesperson? I don't even know what that goes for. I know at Homestead and at the racetrack, try to get a corporate sales guy, and the best guys in Miami are making 150 grand if they're a half decent salesperson. Yep. So it would require that investment, or just hopefully we pray for it, right? That like some really rich guy buys a cart, maybe he buys a GFC shifter cart or buys a GFC KA, and he falls in love with the sport and he wants to give us $1 million to go play with, and he's going to go hire all of his smart friends that are actually going to put the events on. I don't know how it fixes otherwise,
Yeah, but I mean, the story goes too, though. I mean, it's not like I just made GFC out of thin air.
True.
I had to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in this
right.
program and everything. So it's like, it's what you invest into your company is risk versus reward.
For sure.
And I think, if someone's out there willing to risk, getting someone like that, a marketing guy in where he could maybe, get outside sponsorship or get promotion or get a TV deal or something. You think of it as something like Liberating Media. Yeah, they're a huge conglomerate, but buying F1, buying the rights to F1, that was probably a big investment, but the return risk versus reward, they made it happen. So if we can get someone to maybe invest or, somehow get that mentality, and we get someone to do it differently and promote it outside of that, or a marketing person like Zaylu did, and getting Snap on and everything, we could possibly have a different result than what we have right now.
Here's let's see if we had any more comments came in. This was from Bennett Taylor saying about how the 4-cycle scene in the U.S. is big, is a way to increase overall numbers. It's a little bit different than what we're talking about, and I won't push this to these guys. We've talked about this a lot, but that falls more in the category of the K stuff. The numbers are big, but it's not in the same world we're talking on. So I'm gonna save that for a little bit of a different show that we had a little to go in a little more, because the CKNA Grands numbers are good, but it's a one-off big club kind of meetup with some big guys showing up to those races as well.
And the thing that you touched on, Xander, it's like, okay, if we have all these big 4-stroke races, KA races, and everything, that's great for the industry 100%. But when you look at something like you said before, Supercross, well, what do you think every single person that went out and bought a motorcycle and goes to their local track, just like all these guys in the 4-strokes or in the KAs that go race, they watch Supercross and look up to the heroes?
Yes.
Well, if we had something, and we can, it doesn't mean it has to be a standalone event or anything, but let's get real. When KZ goes on the track for Vegas, everyone's on the fence, right?
Yep.
So if we could get it to where we had a couple pro classes where everyone's looking up to that, and then where it gets them energized to go on Car Chaser and watch the live stream and everything, and gets them pumped up. They're like, I'm going to go to the track next weekend because I saw my manufacturer, my favorite driver go and win, and I want to go to the track, so I want to be like that guy. It's kind of the same thing that Supercross did, and I think we could do here. But to get to that level, I think it's back to the promotion side and making it bigger and not doing the same things that we're doing now, because we're not having good results doing it, so to speak.
And that goes back on all kinds of sponsorship fronts, right? I mean, if people are buying GFC carts left and right, because GFC has a brand recognition at those pro races, that just goes back on the funnel to help guys out to get to that top level racing. I mean, it's straight up. Again, the Supercross guys, right? The manufacturers are involved because it's a great bit of branding that will sell them bikes at the end of the day, and that's no different than what any reason you put a guy up front, right? You're putting a guy up front as a team owner, in your case, but both as a manufacturer, not because you want guys to maybe look at your team and say, wow, Gary's a great at driver development, but that GFC go-kart works. That thing won that race, that's what I want to drive on, back home. And, just from, even from a less technical side, just championing, if we had a sense of manufacturer pride, like in NASCAR, they're not buying those cars on Monday, but they root for the Chevy team and they're buying Chevy cars because they're a Chevy guy. They want the Chevys to be there, and that's why those manufacturers are involved and OEMs on that front. The same with Honda versus Chevy and IndyCar to a degree. It's branding even more than anything else. And if we had a series like that, I'd like to think we're working our way to that on a very limited early scale with KC at trying to push the shifter and the X30 stuff hard, where you're getting more eyeballs for winning those classes, but it definitely can't just be us. And I'm going to tell you, like someone commented here says, the media guy, I'm not the best, and I'm not going to be pretending that we are. And we're not the only ones that can make that happen, but at least that would get us to that point for sure. I think that's a good way to wrap it up where we're at. We've ran long, and Gary, again, I know you were on the tighter time crunch than us. Thank you so much. Closing thoughts here. We've had so much to talk about tonight. Chris, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with here before we get to see you again?
Have fun, race. Gary, I'll probably see you this weekend if you're be at SKUSA ProKart, but I think everyone just keep going out the track, having fun racing, and yeah, that's it.
Gary, what about you? You got a busy schedule as always. What do you got coming up? What do you want to let everybody know?
I'm going to actually send Sonny and the Formula Works crew are going to take care of the ProKart. I'm going to stay back and do some business here over the weekend. But I mean, just brand building as always. I mean, as you saw, I was there in Texas. We had Sonny over in SKUSA, Mexico, and we're just trying to grow my brand. And I think, as a closing statement to all the people that are karting, I mean, I think we do have one of the best forms of motorsport. We're involved in one of the best forms of motorsport in the world. And it goes to show that, IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One drivers always come back to go-karting because they feel it's, we've heard it a million times, and the late, great Dan Weldon's put it the best. It is the purest form of motorsports. So, I mean, I'll do my part to keep it going as long as I can, the best I can. And I think, if we all keep a more open-minded, I would say. I think I'm kind of hoping a new crop of business people, promoters and things like that, or just new people injected into the sport can maybe have a different idea that can really jumpstart this thing. And I mean, I don't think maybe necessarily I'm that person, but I hope the industry finds it, and if not, I love the sport the same regardless. But yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate to be in this industry and be a part of it for so long, and I hope we can continue to do so.
Sweet. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. Thank you everybody here for tuning in tonight here for KC Happy Hour. We're going to send you guys off. Love all you guys for tuning in. We'll be back next week to preview the SKUSA Summer Nats. Like Gary said, he's got business to take care of, or not SKUSA Summer Nats, US ProKart Series. Summer Nats is over. I'm out of whack. It's been a long show, but it's been a good show. Please keep sending those comments in. I'm going to respond because we didn't have as much time on the live show to all these comments with my own responses. So if you have any more after the show, keep commenting on this post here. Keep sending us messages. I love getting to talk to all you guys about this, and we love having guys like Chris and Gary on. So we're going to let those guys go, wrap up our show on a positive note. Again, I think, and I've said it before, just like Gary said, we've got the purest form of motorsport. I think we've got the best racing product out there. That's why I'm a big believer, and that's why I've started the media company that we're on and streaming the races, because I think we've got some of the best racing action there is, and I'll put it head to head with any racing series on the planet. It's on my part on the media side to package that as good as we can and build everything up where there's a reason for you guys and your friends to tune in. Hopefully you guys tune in for the USPKS finale in a week and a half. And I will say, as an early teaser, I am so excited after this call we had with Supercards USA for Supernats 25. We've already announced we're streaming that one. It's been a part of our gold calendar here for the year. That's official, locked in. We're going big for it. It should be a lot of fun. We will see you guys next Tuesday.